ran us pretty ragged during November because that's a month that we're named after.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I got really tired and bitter at the end on the 30th. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, guys. And they're like, what? This is so much fun. I'm like, it's so much a pain in the butt. And
that sounds familiar.
yeah, it's what happens to us guys, I guess. Like James and I are bent the same way about stuff. We get all bent out of shape because we're doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, and are you setting up these gigs? Or are you the one making calls and like emails?
Yeah,
that's what starts to drain you. I mean, when you actually do it, it's fine. It's just like for a billion hours before and afterwards, you have to be like,
and then you gotta be
managing
responsible
your time and doing like annoying, boring.
We need this, and this in order to sound this way, and we need, At our last one, I bopped completely in a small way, in that I didn't get a poster down to the venue, which is on the south side of the city. And because we didn't have a poster up, we weren't able to get free beers from the bar. That's their, like, stip.
Why do you need a poster?
It's just their way. It's the way that they run their thing.
Even if you're up there playing.
Yeah, even if you booked it, even if you brought in, which we probably brought in like 25 to 30 people.
Karma Snack. All right, time once again for Truth About Markets, the longest running financial program in the history of the universe, with Max and Stacy on 104.4 FM here in London.
Yeah, and you know what? That theme tune is the theme tune that has followed us around everywhere. Karma Bank.
Yeah. That's right. It's one of the beauties of having a show on Resonance 104.4 is that people can enter into a fugue state of extra existential kind of worm tunneling into a parallel dimension. And something that was good 10 years ago is still good today.
I get it. Hey, speaking of coming back from the past to be just as relevant today, you know, we've been gone from the airwaves of Resonance 104.4 FM and therefore Central London for the past 3 weeks, as everybody has been on vacation, holidays, and all that kind of stuff. And I want to mention that the Resonance 104.4 FM audience might like to know that for Christmas Day, we did a Kaiser Report television special with John Cooper Clarke, who came onto the Kaiser Report in a very epic and special episode. And he read the fantastic Who Stole Bongo's Trousers.
Wasn't that a treat? Yep. John Cooper Clarke was on the show, and everybody loved it. And hope to have him on again later in the year. His star is rising again, as the global economy crashes. And first you had Pussy Riot, of course, big punk band, reestablishing punk as important musical, and now John Cooper Clarke.
Well, speaking of punk, I'm getting a few comments on today's episode of Kaiser Report because I'm wearing a shirt that you bought me over the Christmas break. And it is like a green furry cross on this black shirt with some purple-haired mermaid sort of lady on the front.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Chiron, that thing in the bottom of the screen kind of blocks it out a bit, a little bit. But people are clamoring for that little purple-haired fairy goddess on your shirt, that's for sure.
So, yeah, it's been quite a busy time the last 2 or 3 weeks while everybody's away. A lot of big financial stories and banking stories and global implications have been happening. And a lot of stuff got dumped in there, like, the fact that, say, the U.S. is sending troops to 35 African nations, which is a pretty big story. We're going to cover that on the next Monday's episode of the Kaiser Report. But there's also been the launch of the Kaiser Ethical Silver.
Yeah, that's right. The U.S. is sending troops to 35 or so African countries. They want to see how the Chinese, up close and personal, how Chinese people are taking over Africa. So they want to get people in there, observers. And the Kaiser Ethical Silver is going to be available through the Guernsey Mint in less than 2 weeks. So people here in Europe can get their hands on a Kaiser Ethical Silver 1 ounce, 0.999 pure ethical silver. And what's great about this Kaiser Ethical Silver round is that it will turbocharge the move of silver up to $500 an ounce, because it does two very important things when it comes to economics. It on the supply and the demand side of how things work. So on the demand side, because it's ethical silver, it's the only ethical silver product in the world. So corporations who are sitting with historic amounts of cash, trillions of dollars worth of cash just sitting there on their balance sheet, like Apple Computer, for example, has $150 billion in cash. And of course, cash only returns maybe 0.5%. And also, because of all the money printing going around the world, you could have a lot of problems with inflation. So these corporations are going to start moving into precious metals. And of course, a lot of them are bound by the UN's corporate social responsibility mandate that they have to deploy assets in a socially responsible way by law. So this is the only place that they can do it. So there's going to be a huge new demand coming into the market from corporations as the silver and gold story gets bigger and bigger. Now, on the supply side, the supply is being diminished because part of the supply issues with silver is that there's a lot of what they call, junk silver, or silver that's not accounted by people with jewelry and cutlery and things like that. And so the Kaiser Ethical Silver sources from recycled silver sources. So you're taking a lot of that supply off the market that's, it has the effect of dampening prices when they move higher, because people suddenly dump all their silverware and cash out, and that causes a supply overhang. So here we're taking that off the market right now. So we're both increasing demand and reducing supply with these Kaiser Ethical Silver. Plus, we're riding the, silver's been up on average 20% for 12 years. I think, it's beating Warren Buffett by a huge factor. It's beating just about every single asset class in the world. I think it is the number one asset class for 12 years. At last I checked, it was the number one asset class over 10 years, up 800%. Gold is similarly doing very well, and I think over the next 5 to 10 years, silver will do even better. I think it'll average gains approaching 25 to 30% a year. The pound, the UK pound, is looking bad, and everything is glorious.
Well, yeah, we're not saying it's going to profit, that we're just predicting that the fiat currencies, are going to fall by that much. They're in a race openly. This is the intention, Mervyn King says. This is the intention, Ben Bernanke says. We see in Japan over Christmas, they've re-elected a former prime minister to be the prime minister again, on a promise, on a platform of extremely aggressive monetary policy, as if the last 20-something years weren't aggressive. So they're aggressively devaluing now because of the allegedly floating exchange rate between the yen and the dollar and the pound and the euro, etc. It looks like, some are rising and against the other, but really they're all plummeting to earth. This is our bet. You may have a different one, but we believe that they're all going to crash to nothing, and they'll get their wish. And the only thing standing will be the same thing that has been a currency for the past 5,000 years. It's gold and silver.
You had Captain Paul Watson on the show, and he talks about the economics of extinction. All right, now in the case of bluefin tuna, which is being fished to extinction, the prices are, as Paul Watson mentioned, they're $35,000, $50,000, $60,000 for a bluefin tuna. I saw somebody wrote an email saying that they They saw somebody buying a bluefish tuna for over several $100,000.
$736,000.
Right. So they, as Paul Watson says, it becomes a priceless commodity, because if you fish bluefin tuna to extinction and you have one of the last few dozen of these species left in your freezer, and you've got people out there who want to buy these things, you're going to pay a lot of it out there. Now, in the case of silver, there's only 1 billion ounces above ground. You, me, and everyone listening to this audience have the ability to, quote unquote, fish silver out of existence. We have the ability to take the silver off the market to the point where it's no longer available, which will drive the price to $500 an ounce, which is the campaign. It's up to you. It's up to me. There's only 1 billion ounces left. There's 33 billion above ground, plus this junk silver or recycled silver that is unaccounted for, which nobody knows how much is out there, but it's not, that much. So use this economics of extinction to your favor. To the extent that silver goes to $500 an ounce means banks go out of business. The big 4 banks in the UK that are involved in fraud and all these other crimes, they go out of business. And the currency that is being used, precious metals, goes up exponentially. And, you happen to have a lot of it, so you're doing well.
Now, you've mentioned the junk silver and recycled silver quite a few times, and now our partner on this Kaiser ethical silver coin is a guy named Brian, and he says that actually most of the recycled silver comes from X-rays. So this is where their source gets it, and apparently there are just millions and millions and millions of X-rays around the world in storage at hospitals and facilities like that, where, as the people die and technology has moved on, they have all this extra X-rays that they need to get rid of. And they used to be made with silver. These images, obviously, photography was made with silver. Now they make digital imaging, so X-rays no longer are made with silver. But that's where they get that's where they source a lot of the silver for the Kaiser ethical silver.
Mm-hmm. That's right. A lot of silver comes into the market through recycling, through X-rays, and this kind of supply of silver. That's obviously, it costs money to recycle silver. It's not costless. As the price goes higher, it becomes you have an incentive to recycle it and go after these other sources. But unlike gold, every single ounce of gold, that more or less that's been mined since the beginning of time is still available and above ground. There's about 160,000 tons of it. But silver, because it's used in things like X-rays and it's used industrially, a lot of it's gone. It's not to be found again. It's been thrown away. So that therefore there's only 1 billion above ground. I saw something interesting about platinum, Stacy, that there is only 16 tons of platinum that have been mined that are available above ground. This is a shockingly small amount of platinum. It's basically the size of a house in the cubic square footage of a house of platinum. That's all the platinum that's ever been mined ever since the beginning of time. That's all there is available in platinum.
Wow. And they want to, that's another thing that has now once again reared its ugly head. The idea of a $1 trillion platinum coin. And, we discussed this in Kai's report like 2 years ago when the idea was first floated. And the theory is, so, the U.S. goes more and more bonkers politically every quarter. There's a new level of crazy. It's like everybody is on these bath salts. It used to just be kind of jacked up on Coke sort of crazy. Now it's jacked up on bath salts crazy across the whole economy and political spectrum. But so they always have this deficit ceiling battle, and it's all it's like worldwide WWF wrestling for the population. And what it is I say Congress is the one that determines what they're gonna budget for the year, right? And then at the end of the year, they fight over what they've budgeted, because this is what the debt ceiling is about. So it's always a big showmanship up until the very last second, and markets markets don't seem to notice so much anymore. But anyway, the idea is that, the Constitution of the United States gives only Congress the authority to issue the currency, gold and silver, right? A certain ratio, and they could regulate the value. However, there's a weird exception in that the Treasury can mint platinum coins and regulate the value thereof. So they're saying, instead of having this fight over the debt ceiling, just issue one coin, one platinum coin, and put a face value of $1 trillion, because you're allowed to regulate the value. You could say it's $35, $100, 3,000, a trillion, a gazillion. So just say it's $1 trillion and deposit it at the Fed, and therefore you are not violating, you haven't passed the debt ceiling.
Right. Well, a couple of points pop out first. First of all, of course, $1 trillion would buy about 10 months of time before you hit the debt ceiling again, because its debt ceiling is over 16 trillion. But the other interesting point is that $1 trillion in platinum implies 18,000 tons of platinum. As I just said, the total number of platinum around the world available in the entire world is 16 tons. So you need more than 1,000 times all the platinum in the entire globe to make a $1 trillion platinum coin. So, okay, simple mathematics tells you that you're 1,000 times removed from the possibility of even being able to put together this magical platinum coin. Of course, the other point I think needs to be made is that the same people that are arguing, yeah, we love a platinum coin to solve our deficit, they're the same people who hate gold. That gold-backed currency is a barbarous relic. That you're going backwards. We'll never go back to gold, but we're going to solve our debt problem by minting a $1 trillion platinum coin. I think this shows you how far apart people are when it comes to understanding how bad this fiat fractional reserve, multi-$100 trillion derivative global mess that is being held together with monthly, every single month now. They come with either the debt ceiling or the fiscal cliff, or like, we have to expand the debt. We have to expand the debt. This is happening month by month by month. This is getting bad.
Well, but the fact is, the reason why I think they love it, like the likes of Joe Wiesenthal at Business Insider, is the reason why he likes his platinum coin idea is because it forces it to them. They think they basically turn bullion, precious metals, into fiat, because it's not about getting a real market-based price $1 trillion worth of platinum access. So they don't need 1,000 tons. What they're saying is, we're just going to take one little tiny coin the size of you put your thumb and your pointer finger together, make it a circle, and you'll see that's the size of the coin, they're saying, and they're just going to write $1 trillion on it. This is worth $1 trillion because we say it's worth $1 trillion. So therefore, we've made it into our own fake fiat. We can turn it into whatever we want by the authority vested in the Treasury by the Constitution, and that's it. It's like monopoly money, in the sense that Joe Wiesenthal, the paper bug, would like.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Constitution talks about gold, silver, and platinum as the foundation for a viable economy. Benjamin Franklin famously said one of the biggest reasons for the Declaration of Independence and the Revolutionary War from England was to get away from the Bank of England. And of course, the Bank of England created this idea of lending money to the government at interest and then making a market in the government's own money creation. And it's a bit of a debt slavery model that the American colonies were anxious to get away from. So they put in the Constitution gold, silver, platinum, and referenced it as money. The only way money would be considered money is through these precious metals. And over the 240 years, they've gone to an economy with $100 trillion in debt, if you include the unfunded liabilities of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, plus the national debt and the budget deficit and the corporate debt. And the last vestige they have to the Constitution, the last thread hanging this thing together, is some blogger in New York who wants to create a $1 trillion precious metal platinum coin that will somehow hold us all together. Now, if you are thinking about buying gold, silver, or platinum, this should be a huge signal to you that if the time to buy gold and silver is running out. Since we've talked about it on this show for 9 years, we've only talked about one thing to buy, only one investment to buy, and that's been gold and silver. Gold's been averaging a 17% annual rate of return. Silver's been averaging a 20% rate of return. It's the best performing assets in the world, bar none. Nothing comes close. And now we're saying that this has just been the warm-up act. This has just been the little bit of beginning to a massive bull market where you see gains that are going to be double what we've seen because and you just read the news. I mean, here you have some monkey on some overhyped website that pushed things like Groupon and Facebook and Zynga, where people locked in 50, 60, 70, 80, and 90% losses in 2 or 3 months' time. This is the same site that's now saying, oh, here's the solution. Let's pretend that a pound of provolone cheese is worth $1 trillion and make that a collateral against our 16+ trillion debt ceiling. People. Oh, my God.
And that's it. We're in a sort of unheard of time, really. And I was reading somebody was, responding to a claim that, gold and silver didn't do well as, over 50 years at a certain time during the Great Depression compared to the Dow. And then the precious metals analyst did point out, well, except for the fact that several of those Dow companies went bankrupt, i.e. to zero, had you actually held them, the
Dow Jones, the 30 industrial companies in the Dow Jones are constantly changing. They're not the same Dow Jones from 30, 40, 50 years ago. It changes every 2 or 3 years. They swap companies in and out of the Dow. It's a ridiculous comparison to make. Furthermore, the time period we're talking about is starting in the year 2000, is when Gordon Brown sold 60% of the UK gold, 400 tons, and it was the bottom of the gold and silver market. That's when we started saying buying gold and silver. We're not saying going back to anything beyond 2000. Up until 2000, you had a bull market that started in 1982, is when the bear market in gold and silver started, when the bull market in the Dow Jones started in 1982. That was the inflection point. These two reversed. For 25 years, the Dow, up until 2000, the stock market was in a bull market. Since 2000, we've had the reverse. Priced in gold and silver, the Dow Jones has crashed. Every other asset has deflated or crashed against gold and silver since 2000, like we've been saying. So it makes no sense to use a different reference, point of reference or time reference. That's not what we're saying. If you're counting on using the actual words that we've said, that's what we actually said. If you want to pretend that we said something else and make a point based on your pretending what we said, then that's something else too.
So along with this peak credit, peak fiat, and peak everything, really, we're at a sort of inflection point of ending of this sort of structure and system we have. Comes the commodities and the actual predictions made decades ago that there would be increased drought and floods. This was one of the primary major predictions made by the climate change models decades ago, is that the future would see erratic, in terms of precipitation. That would be one of the most marked, noticeable changes we would see. And sure enough, last year, we've seen record drought in the U.S., and in the UK, it was the second wettest year on record. Waitrose boss, according to this Telegraph headline, Britons should brace themselves for massive food price hikes. Britain's recent food price rises are just the tip of the iceberg, and consumers should brace themselves for massive hikes in some commodities this year. Mark Price said food price inflation would rise further as the heavy rainfall last year meant that many farmers did not plant crops for 2013. He said, we're seeing input food inflation of around 3 to 3.5%, but we expect it to go up as much as 5%. In some commodities, the price increases will be massive. It's bread, vegetables, all produce. The apple crop was down 20 to 30%, so apple prices have to go up. You have only seen the tip of the iceberg. Now, the beauty of a market, of course, is you can shout all you want about conspiracy theories and you don't want to believe it, but don't believe it. Don't hedge yourself. Don't prepare. That's your choice. You don't need to prepare. You know, we've been looking at this for a decade, and you saw what was coming. You saw... And that was part of our plan to buy gold and silver, is at least it's also considered a commodity as well as a currency, and it would track with this pending food price inflation.
Yeah. Well, in the UK, the media has reported on climate change, climate catastrophe, man-made global warming, man-made global climate change, in a more responsible way, I would say, than in the U.S. You know, and this country and this government, you know, they built the Thames Barrier because in response, they spent the money. They said, you know what, our scientists believe, and our government, you know, our quangos and our research suggests that this is really happening. So we're going to spend the money. We're going to build this huge barrier. And they recently used it. They used it just a couple of weeks ago. It was the first time in many years. The Thames Barrier went up, and as was needed. And they're being compared to other, let's say the U.S. They're proactive. And nobody, you know, why is that? Because first of all, you do have some diversity in the media here. You do have some debate in the media. You do have people talking about these things, and there is some healthy debate. And you know, that I don't think it's an accident that you have, let's say, a Lord Monckton, for example, who's a British citizen. He only gets airtime in America, because in the UK he doesn't get any airtime in the UK because not a single person in the UK would give him 5 seconds of time, because he sounds like a children's clown show. You'd never see him. It would just be absurd to have someone like that in the UK at this point, because they are 20 years beyond the idiocy of believing that this is somehow a theory cooked up.
Well, actually, he gets attention in the Daily Mail, and the Daily Mail is often the source of linkage in the U.S. media to climate change denial. So the Daily Mail is a crucial media publication. It presents all sorts of crazy ideas, which are allowed to disseminate around the world. So he does have an outlet here for his ideas, but most people, luckily, like you said, the UK spent, I think it was £1 billion on this flood barrier, which is high tech, did save the city. We could be dealing with a story right now in London of massive floods, or along the Thames, that there could have been massive floods. Obviously, there would have been, because they needed to raise the flood barrier.
Right. Are they going to build one in New York? No.
But so New York, you know, there have been, if you go back, it's actually on Google, you know, News, back to something like 1996. There's an article presented to New York City where a scientist, I think from Yale or Harvard, said that you have to build a flood barrier because this is what's going to happen. And she said exactly that the subways would flood. And the subways had not flooded in the 100 years of existence at that point. And nobody believed her, well, they kind of believed her, but they didn't feel like nobody wanted to spend the money on the flood barrier. And sure enough, it's happened. $35 billion in damage just for New York. Mm-hmm. had they spent, $5 billion, I think they said it would have been up to $7 billion to build the flood barriers to protect Lower Manhattan. But as it is, they decided not to, and here you go. You have a disaster of many times more.
Right, and they're still not convinced, and there's no plans to build anything now. And in New Jersey, which was hit very hard, they turned even the relief money into a political game where it was an attempt to embarrass the Republican governor, Chris Christie, which he was embarrassed. He was forced to beg for the relief money, and he was made to look foolish. And that's unfortunate because it avoids the true question here about what about the fact that you have man-made global warming, climate change, causing the economics not just of tuna fish and whales, but of human beings. Human beings are being forced into extinction by man-made global warming, climate change. And again, unfortunately, it does mean the price of gold and silver are going to continue going higher.
Well, but this is the thing. Okay, so you had plenty of warning of floods and droughts coming. Go back 10, 20, 30 years, and this is what the science said would happen. You could choose to protect yourself. London did. They have, lower costs as a result. Today, they could be facing a bill of 20, 30 billion pounds had the flood waters rose last week and flooded the city. The U.S., New York City, looked at the same data, were given the same warnings, and they decided not to do anything. And it's costing them many, many times more. The same thing with fiat currency. You look at the mathematics of it, the mathematics of debt, the models of debt, we've looked at them, we've presented them to you. You can decide for yourself whether or not you feel like spending your money and your time and your resources now to protect yourself from the collapse that the models suggest will happen, or you decide, you'll deal with it when that happens. Mm-hmm. But at the time, it's going to cost you many, many, many times more in wealth, resources, and time to protect yourself from the disaster that has happened around you.
Yeah. And so one of the big differences is the influence of corporate lobbyists. And 30 years ago in this country, you didn't have a big component of corporate interests, but you do now. So this is why the NHS is being dismantled. This is why the rail system the prices keep going up, even though it makes no sense from a government policy to allow that to happen. So the corporate lobbyists, the American model, unfortunately, is creeping into the UK and destroying the fabric of society in the same way that it's happening in the U.S. It's happening slower than we see in the U.S. because there was an institution that was a harder nut to crack. That is the House of Commons. But now, unfortunately, we see this is being destroyed. I'd have to point the finger at Tony Blair, really, who did everything he could to bring in the spin doctors and the lobbyists from abroad, from overseas, and basically, sell the UK government to the highest bidder.
Well, again, some people believe in a top-down thing and that the elite have all the power. I believe it's also the population. I was here. I witnessed that he was a very charming man. He was a convincing speaker. People loved him, and they let him do that because he was a charming speaker. He was a mesmerizing speaker because he was like in a trance of evangelical passion for his ideas. And he was formerly a lawyer. He can speak well and he can argue well. Even though he was lying, he lied convincingly, just like Bill Clinton did. Bill Clinton destroyed the fabric of the financial system. The reason why we have the crisis today is because of Bill Clinton. But again, he's a snake charmer. He charmed the population. People loved him. People still love him. No matter, even with this financial catastrophe, you hear over and over in America that Bill Clinton, if we only had Bill Clinton back, everything would be okay. Mm-hmm. But he's the one that set you up for destruction because of his smooth talking way. And people couldn't see past it. They couldn't just look at the data, look at the facts, look at the projections of what would happen with the Commodities Futures Modernization Act. What would happen if you got rid of Glass-Steagall? Nobody wanted to, all they were concerned about was how charming he was and his smile and his wit and his charm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mentioned Tony Blair, really, to compare Tony Blair with, let's say, Margaret Thatcher. Thatcher was, you get what you get is on the tin, and she didn't try to pretend to be something other than she was. She said quite openly that, there is no such thing as society. Her views were not equivocated, were they? But then Blair came in as labor. Okay. Now all of the excesses of the Thatcher era should have been. The direction should have been changed to mitigate the damage of that era. But instead, under this, quote, new labor, Blair, they were accentuated. As Thatcher said, her greatest contribution to the Tory party was Tony Blair. That's what she said.
Yeah, but I was here when Tony Blair was elected. He was promising a continuation of her policies that the labor needs. That's why he called it New Labor. At the conference down in Brighton, he added New Labor to it and got rid of there used to be, I forget what it was, like a 5-point thing, a pledge that labor had to do, that they would support unions and labor. He got rid of that before being made leader. Like, it was public and open, and that they would continue the Thatcher thing. We had to adopt the markets. We had to go with this policy of privatization. He said this, and